If you don't read the newspaper, you're uninformed. If you do read it, you're misinformed. What is the long-term effect of too much information?
Information, I just need some information. I've been dying. Is it lack of education? I've been reading without any transformation. I'm addicted. Is it overstimulation? Hey.
Welcome to the Sixth Sense Report.
Hear ye, come one, come all. You are listening to the Sixth Sense Report with Joel Nikoloff and Darnell Samuels.
Man, we're back at it.
Yep.
We're here again. I mean, this is probably a favorite topic of mine, because for the simple reason that I sort of use it as a for the listener, charity. I use charity and nonprofits as a means to compare government, because there's a similar scenario with, let's say, the disconnect between expenses and revenue. So, digging into charity and responsibility, I'm excited. I'm looking forward to this.
Mm-hmm. And I know personally, you're a guy who puts his money where his mouth is, and you're always giving to causes that you believe in.
Yeah, I mean, whether it's charity wise or even the concept
of a friend in need, and what that is.
Yeah, there's that, but there's also, I always say, like, the number one way we vote is with our money, right? And so, I mean, the piece that I think most people don't even think about is, like, what companies do you support, right? Who do you get this service from? Do you align with that company? If you don't, well, then maybe you should try to find a company you do align with as to who you give your funds to. Or in today's conversation about, Facebook and censorship, whose time or what companies do you give your time to? What people do you give your time to? And I think that time piece actually relates a lot to charity, because, it might not cost you something monetarily, but it costs you your time.
Yeah, it's going to be fun, because I think it's important to look at how we use our resources to help those in need. And so for this episode, we're going to be looking at a Maclean's article that's called Canada's Best Charities 2020, Best by Category. And so Maclean's took the liberty of putting together a top 100 charities chart, Canadian charities chart, from the year 2020. And so they have it broken down from, they look at so for the overview, they have a ranking that's based on a reward system that respects the donors by keeping their fundraising overhead and salary spending at a reasonable level. But also, they also punish those that do such spending that are so low they seem too good to be true, and so like too little to attract competent staff and maintain high standards. So there's a give and take, and so the percentage wise, the way how they break it down is, additionally, financial metrics are only worth 60% of the final score, and with transparency accounting for the other 40%. So they have their overview. We'll look into the methodology, but then also we're going to talk about the internship program that we've been working on. For those of you who aren't on social media,
they're boycotting Facebook.
Facebook, whatever. If you guys don't follow us on social media, we started a internship program, and so we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So, looking at the chart, the main categories of charities were environment, fundraisers, health, homelessness, hospital foundations, international, social services, and youth. And was there anything about this chart that stood out to you?
Yes and no. I would say with regards to the categories, there's a probably a massive category that's not included, but it doesn't surprise me because I think even evaluating it as a best charity is really, really tough. And that would be religious organizations.
What do you mean by what do you mean by that?
So mostly churches. So when I say hard to evaluate, I'm referring to the churches piece, but there are other organizations like Bible League Canada that is a charity, and their focus would be, obviously gospel, biblical oriented. And I would say they're not even going to have an opportunity to be on this list. That said, it is Maclean's, and I highly doubt they're really interested in the religious categories either. But I also think, you could have made this from a strategic point, even if they hypothetically, let's say they like church charities. If you were trying to compare a Muslim mosque to a Christian church to, a Sikh temple or to, whatever that becomes exceptionally difficult because of the diversity of, the nature of those organizations. Even though they're religious, they have different religions. And so I think it makes sense it's not on the list, but I thought it's something to point out because you were talking about one of the categories being sort of, let's say, overhead spending or salary spending.
Yes.
For a church, your staff is much more significant. That actually is part of your charitable purpose.
Okay. And I know you're talking out of experience. Can you tell the audience how you know all this?
Yeah, I mean, I've worked in the charity church industry for the last 5 years, 6 years, as an accountant. So I've got a pretty good insight into, churches. I won't go into specifics, just to maybe leave some names out of there. But if you know me personally,
you just start telling their business like, look, man, these guys got a lot of money.
Well, I mean, to be honest,
Pastors,
you might
pimping.
Yeah, I mean, even if you know where I've worked, to be honest, some of the things I'm referring to would be outside of that. And that's because I had exposure that you might not realize through those jobs. And so that's where, if I reference something, it may or may not have anything to do with the place I worked at.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
So, but yeah, no need to name drop, but yeah, I mean, it's, but my point is,
this is good. I love this.
With if you were to sort of try to, because again, percentage of revenue spent on administration costs, right? Now, as a church, you're not going to consider your senior pastor as an administrative cost. And so, those numbers might be comparable, but the other side of it is that, that's a whole different spectrum. And I would say, comparing churches against other churches is something that makes sense. But it's also not so simple because, if you've got a really, really small church, chances are 100% of their donations, or let's say 90% of their donations go to the pastor and pay his salary and then covers the building costs, right? Because the charitable activity is being a pastor or providing religious guidance.
Okay. So let me give some pushback then, because, some people are probably thinking that. So, and this is one of the biggest beefs people have with the church is the money that comes in. And you're talking about most of that funding going to the staff. And based on the criteria on the Maclean's list, they're looking for transparency and how the funds are spent. And so I guess some people are thinking, well, why isn't the church taking that money from the pastor and putting it towards feeding the needy?
Now, I mean, you can make that claim on a really big church, right? So when a church has got like an $8 million revenue and salaries are, under, let's say 25%, well, where's the other 75% going? Chances are they're already feeding the poor. So the scenario where you've got a pastor making, let's say, higher dollar values, not in the lower income ranges, chances are he's part of an organization that is already doing all of those things. And so I only bring that up to say, like, the example of, okay, let's say there's a church making, let's say, $100,000 in donations only, and the pastor's full time. Well, what do you think? The pastor should be making $25,000 so you can feed more homeless people? Like, the pastor's going to be at your food bank. especially if he's got a wife, a wife and kids, and if his wife's working, okay, well, would you think that your pastor should be the lowest paid person in the congregation?
Well, actually, that is that's like I use the term barbershop apologetics, because usually when you're in the barbershop, that's when the church gets attacked most, when guys are getting their fades, and so they'll say, well, that's why I don't go to church, because pastor's too teeth, and so they're saying, why is he making so much money? Why does he look so fly? Now, I can't defend those pastors who, want to dress fly, and maybe they had those clothes from before, or maybe they're bivocational in working 2 jobs, right? But how I would respond to that is that me personally, and this is how I answer those questions. I say, me personally, I don't want my pastor to be part-time. Because we talk about opportunity cost for being a pastor. You're better off just working a regular job if you're going to be doing it for free, because there's no time for it. I need my pastor. When I was sick in the hospital, I need my pastor to be by my bedside. Right? When my marriage is in trouble, I need my pastor to come to my house. And if he's shepherding 200 or whatever, the 200, 300 people, and he's divvying up among elders, and then he has to do study and prep for sermon time and so forth, that's a full-time job. And we're not even talking about him taking care of himself, because part of and we all know this, anybody who's a Christian knows this, you can't spend your time pouring into everybody, right? You need time to go sit down and read your Bible and pray for yourself. And this is why pastors get sabbaticals. Being a pastor is a full-time job. I want my pastor to be
24/7.
Yo, how much you want to bet? I have enough pastor friends, and that's what they tell me. Remember when COVID hit and everybody's like, "Oh, I'm home, I'm on lockdown." Ask any pastor if they were on lockdown, or if they were,
or if they were on their phone.
Yeah, doing counseling. That stuff doesn't stop. And so all I'm just saying is that.
Actually, just to reference Paul Carter, who we had on the show, I don't know if it's in his sermons or I've heard him say it, but he has to be very conscious of okay, how many nights in a row this week did I have to go out to something? Maybe I have to say no because I gotta spend time with my wife and kids, right? And so being really aware of how often they're called away from the house. Yeah, I think he has something like, I won't get called out of the house 3 nights in a row or 4 nights or something. So he's got sort of obviously it's, let's say, a broad rule, but for the exact reason you're talking about, a pastor could be outside of their home every single night of the week with something, assuming they're pastoring 200 people.
And then we didn't Joel, we didn't even talk about having kids.
Yeah.
And spending time with their kids, spending time with their wives. And so for the person who makes the argument, okay, well, why doesn't pastor just work for free? Okay, you find a pastor that works for free, and you tell me how well your spiritual life is doing. Right? You show me a pastor who's flipping burgers and then comes to preach a sermon and tell me how good that sermon is going to be.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
I mean, so not to say that you can't have the exceptions,
but it's hard.
Yeah, exactly.
It's very hard. And you rather have your guy being full time. And I think in light of the McLean's list and why churches aren't on this list, it's pretty obvious that churches can't make this list because of the anatomy of the church. And I think about, because this episode is called Subsidiarity and Charity. And so Pope Leo the 13th, he had this Catholic social teaching called subsidiarity. And it's defined as this, and this is important for us to know in regards to how we as believers interact in society and bring about change with our resources. And so subsidiarity thus means that tasks are to be fulfilled by the lowest element of a social hierarchy. That means people, families, church. And only when this proves impossible is a higher community, such as the state, justified in stepping in and offering assistance. So when these people can't function and produce, then the state can come in and help. But once matters are set right, however, the higher community, being the state, must then withdraw So subsidiarity was deemed important for maintaining a healthy social order in which all parts retain their vitality and initiative over and against the threat of an omnicompetent state. And so use your imaginations with me and think of a hierarchy, right? A triangle, right? And so the way how subsidiarity works is that God's at the top, individuals are at the bottom. And at the top of the triangle is the church. And then below the church is the state. And then below the state is the intermediary structures. So that's marriages, schools, charities, political parties, professional associations, families, businesses, labor unions, drama clubs, and dance troupes. So everybody has a role to play within society, and so the church has a role to play and isn't, and basically has a role to play in it. And we talked about this with Joe Boot when Joe Boot was on the show, and we talked about sphere sovereignty. And so when we talk about sphere sovereignty, that's the work of Abraham Kuyper. And I don't know if you guys heard us mention this guy before, but he's a Dutch academic, professor, politician, pastor, right? And so his is less hierarchical. So it's not about hierarchy in this aspect when we talk about sphere sovereignty. So the idea is that the social order is a lot more flat, and there's overlap in regards to people's roles in society. So God gives these agencies sovereignty in their responsibilities. So for example, right, the mom has sovereignty over her children, and so forth. And the church has sovereignty in a particular sphere, and then the state has sovereignty in a particular sphere. And there's areas where they might overlap. But the point I'm making is that there's a joint responsibility that everybody has a role to play in helping others. Joel harps on this all the time, in that the government oversteps its bounds in taking away the responsibility or incentive for us to help our fellow brother. And I'm guilty, and I'll confess, I'm guilty of that, in that when I see a person on the street and, you know, they want money, the first thing that comes through my mind is that, okay, well, I pay taxes, so why don't you just go apply for welfare and stop bothering me?
Yeah, and I think if I was to, try to be very precise in the way that I frame it, it's not that the government like the terminology "government crowds them out" is correct, but that doesn't just properly describe how the economics or the economic environment, i.e. the incentives, are changed. So the example that I think of is, I don't depend on you to be responsible for me, so why are you depending on me? Right? So if there was no government welfare, the incentive for you to help your neighbor is, if I was in this position, I want him to help me. But now that I take away that sort of personal connection between providing for my own community and remove it and put it at the governmental level, I now have, I lack the incentive, because and that's sort of an oversimplification of how the incentive structure has changed, right? Because I'm not depending on you, you're not depending on me. But the idea is also, when you receive charity, it sort of came from me through my taxes, but now it's impersonal in nature. And so think about it this way. If over your lifetime, every year you found that there was another neighbor you needed to give, let's say $1,000 to, and of course this would be in lieu of taxes, the way that you interact with your neighbors, from receiving gifts directly and giving gifts directly of that nature, would be vastly different. And so the lack of those experiences, replaced by an impersonal handout from government, changes the way that we interact with each other, changes the way that we perceive each other. And so it's not, in my opinion, it's not so clear how government crowds out the charity in this case. The other example that I think, Darnell, you're sort of referring to, where, you see this person on the street, you're like, I'm not going to support, why don't go get the welfare program? The same thing actually happens in the church, right? When you have a benevolence fund within the church, Well, guess what? The government has put rules in place that if I start supporting someone in my church regularly, now that is a taxable benefit. They have to reclaim that essentially as welfare from a private organization. So churches now are incentive. They can do, the way you can support, and this isn't just churches, but in general, any organization that helps the poor, any ongoing support becomes a taxable event, something that I have to issue a tax slip to the individual for. But if I do a one-time sort of support, that's okay, right? So if someone in your church comes and says, like, we're totally underwater, all our bills are backed up, and the church decides, okay, let's pay their heat, hydro, water bills, get those all caught up, as a one-time thing, that's okay. That's not taxable. And you'd sort of have to show that you're not showing favoritism, you following sort of, let's say, some standard rules. But there's a second piece to this. The church now, I've literally seen this question, and I don't mean to be, if anyone's hearing this who's done this, I don't mean to be disparaging. I'm speaking about the environment that's created. Church leaders will sort of first say, have you taken advantage of every government program that's there? Right? Before we help you, or as part of helping you, are we getting you involved with all of the welfare programs that exist? And if we go back to the conversation with Joe Boot, the episode, we discussed the idea of
sphere sovereignty.
Well, sorry, but whose responsibility is charity under sphere sovereignty? We said it was the family. Right now, the family becomes a little bit more broad in a sense, but now because of the way government has encroached on that responsibility, families now go, well, go get the welfare program. Now, obviously with your kids, you let them live in your house. Parents, make the basement into a basement apartment so they're, kids that need help will still. But beyond sort of, let's say, that one generation, how many people really help their cousins or aunts and uncles, right? Like, not to say some people don't, but how much more would we have a family that is taking care of each other if we didn't have government doing it? And I would argue that would actually lead to a better society because we have vested interest in each other, more so, as opposed to being very autonomous in living.
Yeah, and I think, and I was going to say that in light of a sphere of sovereignty, and you talked about charity, and we're talking about charity now, and we talked about, you said you can add spiritual to this McLean's list, education, health, fundraising. Can we make an argument that as Christians, one of our main priorities is the funding of the church to do the church of the work of the spreading of the gospel and missionary work and so forth? And this is the reason why it won't be on the list?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, obviously we've sort of avoided the list, and that wasn't necessarily my intention by bringing up, church, but for us,
it's a good point. It's an excellent point.
It's important. And no, if you go through some of their criteria, like they have a tab. So there's sort of 4 tabs: overview, charity grades by sector, top 100 list, and then methodology. If you go through the methodology, it doesn't really tell you it's going to exclude churches. But if I look at certain things, like for example, they say they must have a charity intelligence report updated for the 2016 tax year or more recent. I would highly doubt any church is going to get that report, because the members don't need that report. And the members of the church, or the donors of the church, are going to obtain the same information in a different means. So I only say that to say there's a couple reasons why they wouldn't be on this list. But if I want this list to be comprehensive, I think you need to sort of consider churches and charities, but also know why they're not on the list.
Right. And I think that, that's a good point, Joel. And so I guess when we look at us and the responsible of society and individuals and the way we spend our money, there's different places that we feel like if we invest our money in certain areas, that will be that's what's best for society. So again, on the list they had homelessness. That's important. Pouring money into the youth. That's important. Environment. They have one that's other. maybe that might be church, international aid, social services, fundraising, organization, health, education. And so in regards to sphere sovereignty, and our responsibility to fund the causes we believe in, as a Christian, it's funny, I was doing devotion with Tyra, and we were in Luke chapter 12, verse 13 to 34. And I'm sure some of you are familiar with the passage. That's where Jesus calls the guy, "Fool, your soul is required of you." If you're familiar with that passage. But so I'm just going to read it for you. And I want to point out an observation that me and Tyra made from it. Now, if you could please turn, get your Bibles, and please turn to Luke chapter 12, verse 13 to 34. Say amen when you get there.
Amen.
Luke chapter 12, verse 13 to 34. And it says, "Someone in the crowd said to him, 'Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me.' But he said to him, 'Man, who made me judge or arbiter over you?' And he said to them, 'Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions.' And he told them a parable, saying, 'The land of a rich man produced plentifully. And he thought to himself, What shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops. And he said, I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry.' But God said to him, 'Fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be? So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God.'" And so what I first thought this passage was about was a guy who doesn't know God and wasn't looking towards the Lord, and wasn't trying to prepare for eternity. But when you look at verse 20, this is the issue. It says, "But God said to him, 'Fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be?'" Right? So he's a fool because the resources he left behind are for nobody. Right? The crime wasn't him building bigger barns to store his wealth. That wasn't why he was a fool. He was a fool because he didn't leave his
legacy,
wealth behind for other people. Right. And because, every time I heard, I was like, oh, because he wasn't really, he's a fool because he wasn't saved or he wasn't looking towards heaven. Mm-hmm. But no, he was a fool because he had a lot of resources, but he didn't put it in the right place. So there's nothing wrong with investing in building wealth, but we want to make sure that we leave a legacy, like you said, and that we are being philanthropic with our resources, and that we are looking for to promote good.
Yeah, and a couple of verses that sort of to come to mind that relate to that is, verse 21. So from NASB says, "So is the man who stores up his treasure for himself and is not rich towards God." And so what I thought of in that regard was, the idea of James says, what's true religion? Taking care of the poor and the widow, right? And so I don't know, that's just what I was thinking about with being rich towards God has sort of two meanings, right? There's are you eternally minded, right? So are you spending all of your time making money in this world, but not, spiritually enriching yourself, not having a relationship with God, so you're not eternally minded. But also, even if you are eternally minded with your resources that you have on this earth, are you considering what God's calling you to?
Yes, and this is why I brought up the idea of subsidiarity and sphere sovereignty. So subsidiarity is the responsibility, and that change is happening from the grassroots level. That change is happening from the home, from the local level, the church, the individual, that the individual can bring about change. And we know this because that's how history has always moved forward. Barack Obama is one man. Abraham Lincoln is one man. Martin Luther King is one man. But these are single individuals. Abraham Kuyper, Frederick von Mises. These are just individual people that have changed history, right? And so that's why I bring up the subsidiarity in how change happens with the local level. But then sphere sovereignty points to the different responsibilities different agencies have within the culture, the state, the church, the family, the school.
So I think for the listener, just you sort of been referencing subsidiarity, you've been referencing sphere sovereignty. Do you want to just quickly sort of unpack how they're similar and different? Because there's a lot of similarity, but at the same time, you sort of been using, I don't want to say interchangeably, but you sort of jumped from one to the other. And I think they both have value in this conversation, but I think it'll help the listener if you sort of point out how they're.
Okay. So the way how they're similar is that they believe that there's different responsibilities throughout the culture. The family has a responsibility. The state has a responsibility. The church has a responsibility. The school has a responsibility. But where they're different is that change happens at the local level with the individual, with the family. And then sphere sovereignty is saying, okay, well, each particular agency has its own responsibility and culture. Sometimes they overlap and sometimes they don't.
Okay, good.
Right. And so we bring that up to segue into our internship program. Right. And so let's just start with the simple question. What is an internship?
Well, I mean, I think a good example sort of goes back to something I said on a previous episode, that like when you're, to some extent is a job, but it's not a regular job. And, what I said on the previous episode was that, money isn't the most important thing sometimes when you have a job, especially when you're entering the workforce. Yeah, the money is good because it helps you, pay for whatever. But the experience you gain is more valuable. And that's sort of what an internship is intended to be. It's primarily about experience and learning. And so we're, our hope with this is to pour into somebody that has an interest in, let's just say, podcasting is not a comprehensive enough term. But of course, just like social media development being, if they want to start their own podcast or they want to see how things work behind the scenes with the Sixth Sense Report, we can help you do that. So for people who don't, like, for example, there are a lot of famous people who've taken interns to get to where they're at. And actually, there is an advantage to getting an internship versus just getting hired. Because like you said, Joel, the importance of an internship is that the work or the experience or the skill that you develop is more important and more valuable than the money. Because yes, this is a paid internship for those of you who don't know and who are not on social media, that it is a paid internship, but the concern isn't necessarily for the money, because the skills you're getting is more valuable than the money. And if you are concerned about the money, then this will not be the internship for you. And that's why on the header we put the first requirement is that you believe in the Sixth Sense Report brand. Mm-hmm.
Right? Because you have to love the work that you're doing. You have to believe in what you're doing. If you don't believe in what you're doing, you're not going to do good work. And then the money's not going to come. You do good work, the money will come. So I just wanted to list a couple people who have had internships and turned out all right. We have Steven Spielberg, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. He did an internship. The prolific filmmaker and producer began his career by attempting an unofficial internship at the Universal Studios. Steven was 17 years old, and although he wasn't allowed on the movie lot, as he wasn't an official intern, he sneaked in anyway and networked with directors. Now, how did that turn out for him? Right?
Yeah, I think it's pretty
you
good.
have Oprah Winfrey. You have Oprah Winfrey. So the famous TV host got her start by doing an internship at WLAC-TV, a CBS affiliate in Nashville, Tennessee. Oprah succeeded to such an extent that the program offered her a full-time spot as a reporter, and she eventually became the first African-American female news anchor. Her internship, therefore, was directly responsible for her professional career. How about Tom Hanks? Right? Tom Hanks has made, has been in films that have grossed more than $4.9 billion. Right? So Tom Hanks completed an internship at the Great Lakes Theater Festival in Cleveland, Ohio, while he was attempting to complete a college degree. Hanks credits his internship for giving him confidence as he acquired valuable theater production experience. The internship eventually lasted 3 years and led to him dropping out of college. Life is like a box of chocolates, indeed. And Tom Ford, the clothing designer, and he, what did he do? For those of you who don't know, Tom Ford's architectural studies no doubt helped develop his aesthetic sensibilities. Right? So Anderson Cooper's one. We have Bill Gates on the list. We have Steve Jobs. And the list goes on. And Puff. Puff is on this list. It's Black History Month. Spike Lee's on the list. So the point we're making,
and I mean, if you look at the industries they're in too, right? These are industries that, for the most part, the internship gets you exposure, and that exposure becomes, yes, you do learn, but you get exposure and learning. I think about, I don't know how it works in Canada, but I don't know if you recall all the hospital internships, right? Like, basically making no money or literally no money and just, working to prove yourself so that you can become a paid position.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so the point is that the internship will help you get to where you are. And one of the or three of the key values that we wanted to help the intern develop, because we believe that, if you learn these three key values which we're going to help you with, even if you don't go into podcasting or social media or whatever the case may be, whatever gifting you have, you can develop that. So, for example, the three things you'll benefit from, you'll walk away from, is economic, theological, and financial literacy. Joel, do you want to talk about the importance of economic literacy?
Yeah, I think there's a quote that I'm going to butcher because it's like, economics is a dismal science. And the quote is that, so many politicians basically, spout off about, an economic idea while completely ignorant of economics. I always describe economics. I try to use non-financial concepts or examples. I mean, I always talk about, part of me recording this episode is I'm sacrificing time with my family. That's economizing my time. That's what economics is. It's about allocation of scarce resources. For us as individuals, our time is the most scarce resource that we have. And so understanding that economics is about the incentives that exist and the decision and what goes into the decisions people make, it gives you tools to perceive and analyze situations so differently. And I think about our original producer who, from listening to our conversations, talked to us about, okay, I see things differently now. At least whether he agreed with us or not is not so much the point. It's that, some of these tools with economics are just so foreign, and until you sort of see them laid out and walk through them and ask maybe some tough questions, economics is a dismal science. It almost makes no sense at times. But it's, to some people, a very important way. And people, I'm an example of that. If I didn't have economics, I would lack a lot of tools to perceive the underlying context for where things unfold, right? I mean, I said this on an episode of Kazin Graham Dialogue that's coming out, that most people think I'm anti-government, but that's because my conclusions come to opposing government. But I come there because I use economic tools to say, wait, should we be doing this? Whereas people, I would argue, generally analyze things from a motivations perspective. Well, the government has the right intentions, therefore, how could it be bad? And I think that's an oversimplistic analysis that without economic tools, I'm not surprised that many people make, because how else would you evaluate them? Well, they can't earn profit. Yeah, well, why is that a problem? And until you have economics as a tool to see how profit relates to incentives, I think it leaves you too willing to accept solutions that may actually not be productive.
And then I would add that in regards to the theological aspect, of course, you want to get right with God and you want to, be saved. That's important. But there's also another command that God gives us, and you hear me talk about all the time, the cultural mandate, the first Great Commission. God calling us to use his creation to bring about human flourishing. So part of it is understanding how God has created it and how to use it to the best of your ability to help others, but also understanding sin, understanding your sinful nature and other people's sinful nature and how to navigate the world in light of it. And this is why it's important to have, to be theologically literate, to be able to interpret, I'm going to use a big word, meta-narrative. The meta-narrative is God working behind the scenes, the story behind the story. Yes, you're going through a divorce. Yes, you have cancer. Yes, you just got jumped in the alley and robbed. But there's a bigger hope. There's a brighter hope behind all the darkness we're seeing, and it's important, especially for your sanity and mental health, that you have theological literacy. And then the last benefit.
Well, I would say just and for the listener that's, okay, I don't really care about theology. The one thing.
Well, hold on. I want to answer that person who says I don't care about theology. I would say if you have a comment about God and about higher other beings, then you are a theologian. You're already in this. But go ahead.
Yeah. Well, and it's okay. So let me reword that. For the person who says I don't need to learn theological literacy, I feel like I've already got that skill. I think one of the things that me and you talk about, I don't know if we do it too much on the show, but as we have our conversations, the skills that we have learned from exegesis of text and how we apply that outside of the biblical context. So even the theological literacy of that approach, how do we apply that approach when we're analyzing whether it's a newscast or whether it's an article, or so there's the application of that theological literacy that the listener may not or the potential candidate might not think is as valuable as we at least I think it is.
And I think that like component ideas like social justice and understanding what is racism, what is justice, these are all theological concepts. And I would argue that the God of the Bible has the monopoly on what is right and what is wrong. So as much as you want to know about how to use your time wisely and a reallocation of resources, God knows the heart, and he's a master of the heart. And he has given us all that we need to know about the human heart and what's wrong with the world. And so this is why it's important to be theologically literate. And so the last thing that we want to help the intern with is financial literacy. And we got help from Sho Baraka, and he's the host of the True Wealth podcast, formerly known as Dollar Savvy. And so Sean's been on the show before, and he's a financial.
2 times.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And he's a financial advisor. And basically what the intern will have, because we're going to be paying the intern and they'll be coming into some money, we want to make sure that you are using the money wisely. And so you'll have once a month sessions with Sean to develop your financial literacy and learn how to be a better steward of your funds. And so we believe that these three concepts will help you to grow your potential as a person, whatever your gifting is. If you have these key components, then you will be able to be successful and be a contributing member to society. And I just wanted to quickly just hit on one point that you made, Joel, about economics and the use of time, and about the use of time, and then time is very valuable. And part of it is that with pointing back to how much money you're going to get, we're not going to disclose that on the show, but the point is that Joel and I we believe in these values. We believe in this cause. And we believe that because of the values that we hold to, these particular values, we can't take money from the government, because the government's going to, just put red tape on us and tell us what we can't do. But because we believe in economic values, theological and financial literacy, we're going to take it upon ourselves to fund this particular venture to help bring about change. So 6 cents makes change ain't just a fly statement. Like, this is real. This is real-ish, man.
I thought you were about to bust out a rap that you prepared or something. I was like, oh no, whoa.
Yeah, I know,
whoa.
I know. Next time.
you got all like hyped up in there. I was like, okay, where's he going with this?
But it's important that we're putting money behind this. But for those people who are thinking that, okay, I'm coming in to get this job to make money, this is not what it's about. It's about developing your skill. And we talked about this like in one of our first episodes, that the true minimum wage is
zero.
It's zero. So if you don't, right, the true minimum wage is zero, because people are like, okay, so if I get this thing, then da-da-da-da-da, but the true minimum wage is zero. In light of that, if you're a grown man, it's going to be harder for you to do the work for relatively free, because as an adult, you can easily
responsibilities,
and you can easily go get a job that'll pay more. So there's no point in you coming to do that. We'd like anybody. Anybody's free to open to anybody to come to the internship. But if you're a young person and you're not eligible to work, this is where you coming to join the internship is beneficial for you, because you're not able to work. That money, whatever money we give you, it's going to be better than not getting any money from working at all.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And that's where, the idea of like, well, you're also building your resume. You're putting experience, there's just the idea that, I only work for money, is something I think that, I don't know if it's society or school, like we just have this sort of very, I work to get money so that I can live. Most, just this, even the idea of like, my job is I work at a boring job, right? So I think the goal here is we're trying to, hopefully someone who's going to come along that's passionate about this kind of thing and enjoys it, as opposed to looking at it like a chore. But they're learning and they're growing, and that's, maybe spending more productive time on social media than normal.
Yes, but see, but this is the heart of entrepreneurship, because when you are doing work that's meaningful, it'll be meaningful to others. And that's when the money starts coming in, because instead of just chasing money, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm chasing money. Stop chasing the money and develop that skill you have and provide a service that no one else can provide. Then the money will come in. So making sure that we don't have our priorities when it comes to being an entrepreneur backwards. So hopefully, for anybody that's listening and you want to send in your resume to sixcentsreport@gmail.com. Let us know. And listen to this episode and let us know that you're interested, and then we'll be in contact with you.
Yeah, and you can also, if you have questions or want more information, feel free to email us. We can maybe give you a little rundown of what that role takes, and go from there. So, email or hit us up on social media, sixcentsreport at Gmail, or at Facebook or Twitter, and just let us know.
And okay, Joel, what's your 2 cents?
Yeah, my 2 cents is that that charity is something that society almost want to say undervalues. there's an article from Fraser Institute that charitable donations hit an 18-year low in 2020. Now, of course, this is a year that arguably it's not surprising because how many people were without income or, lost jobs. So, it is what it is. And actually, I probably stand corrected. I think this the article is referencing 2018 as the calendar year, but I'm guessing now that I've corrected myself that the 2020 most likely would fall underneath it. But again, I could be wrong. When government's handing out money, people got to put it somewhere, and if it was excess money, that chances are maybe charitable giving went up, which would be kind of interesting. So yeah, but in general, I think the role of charity in society is undervalued. I think government continues to try to take over these things. I got a great article that I'll put in the show notes page from Fee that says, "What if charity replaced taxation?" I also think about a previous episode when we were talking about foreign aid. Foreign aid is another example of essentially government charity. And, there's plenty of reports out there for years that this type of charity is corrupt. It really doesn't achieve much or at all. And so, I'm a big proponent of private charity, and, whether it's taxable or not, I think our society would do better if we continue to sort of look for helping our neighbor, but also living in community. When we're in trouble, we go to our neighbors or our community first and try. And maybe there's an aspect of shame where people want to go to the government and do it in secrecy. But I think that actually results in a hindrance in our relationships long run. What about you? What's your 2 cents?
So my 2 cents is just that I think it's important that we steward our funds well, right? And that, again, we're not saying that give us money. What Joel and I are trying to demonstrate is that we are trying to do what it says in Luke 12. We're trying to leave a legacy and put our funds behind the values that we believe in, because we know that the things that we believe in will not get any support from Justin and his squad. You know what I mean? It's just like, you know what I mean? Like,
yo, but man, he announced black entrepreneur support or something, right?
Well, man, I'm not black enough, so it is what it is. But
that's because you didn't vote for Joe Biden.
Yeah, but I'm a big believer. You're a big believer. We're not here to make money. We believe in these values, and so we want to support it. And so all we're saying to you guys is make sure that you are good stewards of the resources God is giving you, and that you're supporting ventures you believe in. You support your family, you support your church. Hey, maybe you might support your media too, right? Because the world is growing, right? And now people are picking and choosing the media that they want to invest in. And so,
shout out to True North, who runs their media through a nonprofit charity. Mm-hmm. So you can get a tax receipt for supporting them.
Right. And so I'll just leave this, and this is what's on our intern contract, and it says this: the 6 Cents Report seeks an intern to assist in day-to-day social media activity. This internship will give the intern valuable real-world experience in the context of content creation and curation. 6 Cents makes change by combating social disenfranchisement with developing human potential. We do this by teaching economic, theological, and financial literacy in the context of everyday life. And that's what you guys are hearing in every episode. These things being put into context in everyday life. We are confident our internship will help you maximize your God-given gifts for the greater good. That's my 2 cents.
And I think the internship speaks for itself with what we're trying to do. 6 Cents makes change.
But you heard me? Does that make sense?